The coffee in Rick Torres' mug had gone cold hours ago, but he couldn't bring himself to move from the observation deck of Luna Base. Outside the reinforced windows, space had changed. Where once there had been familiar stars and the distant glow of Earth, now there was shadow. Massive alien ships blocked out entire constellations, their hulls stretching for kilometers in every direction. The invasion fleet had arrived exactly as Earth scientists had predicted it would, but seeing it with his own eyes still made his stomach turn. "Sir, incoming transmission from the lead vessel," reported Lieutenant Walsh from the communication station behind him. Her voice carried the kind of forced calm that people used when they were trying not to panic. Rick had heard that tone a lot in the past 6 hours. Ever since the alien armada had dropped out of hyperspace and taken position around Earth. Rick finally turned away from the window and walked to the main console. The message was already being decoded by the bases. Computers translated from whatever language these aliens used into something humans could understand. The translation was rough, full of gaps and awkward phrasing, but the meaning was clear enough. "People of the third planet," the message began, "you are now property of the Galactic Coalition. Your species will be relocated to designated zones. Your world will be processed for Coalition use. Resistance will result in elimination. You have 1 rotation of your planet to surrender." Rick looked around the command center at the faces of his crew. Some looked scared, others angry, but none looked surprised. They had all known this day would come eventually. Ever since humanity had developed faster-than-light travel 50 years ago, they had found evidence of other civilizations scattered throughout the galaxy. Most of those civilizations were gone now, their worlds stripped clean or their populations relocated to work camps on distant moons. The Coalition, as they called themselves, was vast. 12 different alien species working together to expand their territory and gather resources. They moved from system to system like locusts, taking everything useful and leaving nothing behind. Earth spy networks had been tracking their movements for decades, watching as they consumed world after world. Now it was humanity's turn. "Open a channel to Earth Command," Rick ordered. Within seconds, the familiar face of General Lisa Nakamura appeared on the main screen. She was calling from the underground bunker complex in Australia, where Earth's military leadership had relocated when the invasion fleet first appeared. "Rick, are you seeing what we're seeing up there?" she asked without preamble. 12 different ship types, each one bigger than our largest carrier, he replied. "I count over 300 vessels total, not including the smaller fighters and support craft. They're maintaining position in high orbit, probably waiting for our response to their surrender demand." General Nakamura nodded grimly. "They're not going to get the response they expect. Send them our reply." Rick had memorized the message hours ago, but he still felt a chill as he spoke the words into the transmitter. "This is Commander Rick Torres of the Luna Defense Station, speaking for the people of Earth. We have received your demand for surrender. Our response is simple: come and take it." The alien reply came back within minutes, and this time the translation software had an easier time with it. The message was shorter, more direct. "Your defiance is noted. Pacification will begin immediately." Through the observation windows, Rick watched as the alien fleet began to move. The largest ships stayed in position, but hundreds of smaller craft detached from their hulls and began moving toward Earth's surface. These were the pacification drones the Coalition used to break the will of defending populations. Each drone was the size of a city block and carried enough firepower to level a mountain, but as the drones entered Earth's atmosphere, something unexpected happened. The planet's defense grid, hidden for decades beneath layers of space debris and defunct satellites, came online all at once. Thousands of weapons platforms that had been disguised as junk suddenly revealed themselves, their targeting systems locking onto the incoming drones. The first wave of alien attackers ran straight into a wall of human firepower. Railgun slugs and missile swarms tore through their formations, while energy weapons carved bright lines across the darkness of space. The drones, designed to overwhelm primitive civilizations with superior technology, found themselves fighting an enemy that had spent 50 years preparing for exactly this moment, but the real surprise came when Earth's fighter squadrons launched from hidden bases scattered throughout the solar system. The human pilots didn't fly in neat formations like the aliens expected. Instead, they moved like a swarm of insects, each craft following its own path while somehow coordinating with all the others. Their movements seemed random, chaotic, but every maneuver was calculated by artificial intelligence systems that learned and adapted faster than any alien computer. Admiral Thane watched the battle unfold from the bridge of his flagship with growing confusion. His intelligence reports had described humans as a barely spacefaring species with primitive weapons and no real military organization. The creatures currently tearing his advanced forces apart were nothing like what he had expected. How are they coordinating their attacks? He demanded from his tactical officer. I see no command signals, no formation patterns, yet they fight as one unit. The tactical officer, a tall reptilian creature from the world of Nexus, studied his displays with obvious frustration. Unknown, Admiral. Each human craft appears to be operating independently, yet their combined actions suggest a level of coordination that should be impossible without direct communication. On the main screen, another group of pacification drones exploded under concentrated human fire. The debris field was already so thick that some alien ships were having trouble navigating around it. What should have been a simple clearing operation was turning into a massacre. Perhaps their communication methods are beyond our detection capabilities, suggested the ship's science officer, a pale blue humanoid from the far edge of Coalition space. Admiral Thane considered this possibility. In 50 years of conquest, the Coalition had encountered species with advanced technology before, but none that had hidden their capabilities so effectively. The human defense systems were clearly more advanced than their intelligence had suggested, but how much more advanced remained to be seen. Recall the pacification drones, he ordered finally. Deploy the battle squadrons instead. If these humans want to fight, we'll give them a real battle. But even as he gave the order, Admiral Thane felt the first stirring of doubt. The Coalition had conquered 47 worlds using the same basic strategy: arrive with overwhelming force, demand. Surrender, crush any resistance with superior technology. It had worked every time. This time felt different. Maya Okafor drifted in the shadow of asteroid J47, her modified mining vessel powered down to minimal systems. Through the cockpit window, she could see the alien supply convoy moving slowly through the asteroid belt. Their massive cargo ships escorted by sleek warships that bristled with weapons. The aliens thought they were safe out here, far from Earth's defensive networks. They were wrong. 6 months had passed since the invasion began, and the war had settled into a bloody routine. The Coalition controlled the space around Earth, but they couldn't land troops without facing fierce resistance from human defenders who seemed to treat every street corner as a fortress. Meanwhile, human raiders like Maya struck at alien supply lines. Using tactics that no civilized species would consider honorable, Maya checked her chronometer and keyed her radio to the encrypted frequency her squadron used. Ghost Leader 2. All units. Target convoy approaching checkpoint 7. Remember, we hit hard and fast, then disappear into the belt. No heroics, no prisoners. The responses came back one by one from the other ships hidden throughout the asteroid field. Her squadron consisted of 12 vessels, each one a converted civilian craft that looked harmless enough to avoid suspicion until it was too late. The aliens had learned to fear human military ships, but they still underestimated the threat posed by what appeared to be civilian vessels. Ghost 3 here, came the voice of Captain Paul Wright, whose converted transport ship carried the squadron's most dangerous cargo. Biological weapons are armed and ready. These doses are specifically tailored for the hegemony species. One successful hit should spread through their entire crew within hours. Maya felt a grim satisfaction at those words. The Coalition's greatest strength was also their greatest weakness. Having 12 different species working together meant they had diverse capabilities and perspectives. But it also meant they were vulnerable to biological weapons designed to target specific alien physiologies. Human scientists had been working around the clock to create plagues that would affect only enemy species, leaving human captives and allied aliens unharmed. The lead cargo ship was almost in position now. Maya could see the alien crew moving around inside through the transparent sections of their hull. They looked relaxed, confident, completely unaware that they were about to die. She pushed aside any thoughts of mercy. These same aliens had bombed human cities, had turned millions of her people into refugees living in underground shelters. They had started this war. All units, execute attack pattern Delta, she commanded. The asteroid field suddenly came alive with human ships emerging from hiding spots among the rocks. The aliens had perhaps 3 seconds to realize they were under attack before the first missiles struck their escorts. Maya's ship, disguised as a broken-down or hauler, accelerated directly toward the largest cargo vessel while her weapon systems came online. The alien escorts tried to respond, their energy weapons carving bright lines through space, but the human ships were already moving in evasive patterns that seemed to anticipate where the aliens would aim. Each human pilot was linked to an adaptive AI system that learned from every battle, building up a database of alien tactics and developing counters in real time. Maya's ship collided with the cargo vessel at just under ramming speed, her reinforced hull punching through the alien ship's armor like it was made of paper. As the two vessels locked together, her boarding team moved through the breach into the alien ship's interior. They wore full environmental suits and carried weapons designed to work in zero atmosphere. The aliens they encountered were tall, pale creatures with too many joints in their arms and legs. They tried to fight back with personal weapons, but they had never faced an enemy like humanity before. Human soldiers didn't just fight to win. They fought like they had nothing left to lose, because in many cases they did and single quotes did within minutes. Maya's team had secured the cargo bay and begun transferring the alien supplies to their own ships. Food, medical supplies, weapon components, raw materials. Everything the Coalition needed to maintain their siege of Earth was now going to be used against them instead. But the real purpose of the raid wasn't just theft. As her team worked, Paul Wright's specialists were releasing biological agents throughout the alien ship's atmosphere system. By the time the surviving crew members returned to their base, they would be carrying death with them. Ghost Leader, "We've got problems," reported one of her pilots. "Long-range sensors are picking up alien reinforcements. Looks like a full battle group 30 minutes out." Maya checked her own sensors and cursed under her breath. The Coalition was learning to adapt to human tactics, just as humans were adapting to theirs. Instead of leaving their supply convoys lightly defended, they were starting to position rapid response forces nearby. "All units, finish loading and prepare to scatter," she ordered. "Use evasion pattern 7 and rendezvous at base camp in 6 hours. The human ships began to separate, each one heading in a different direction through the asteroid field. The aliens would have to choose which ones to pursue, and by the time they made that choice, most of the raiders would have disappeared into the maze of rocks and debris that humanity had turned into their hunting ground. As Maya's ship accelerated away from the burning wreckage of the convoy, she allowed herself a moment of satisfaction. The aliens had superior technology in overwhelming numbers, but they were fighting by rules of warfare that had been developed over thousands of years of conflicts between civilized species. Humans weren't civilized, at least not in the way. The Coalition understood the term. The aliens fought to conquer, humans fought to survive. That difference was becoming more important with each passing day. Back on Earth, General Lisa Nakamura stood in the main command center of the Australian bunker complex, watching reports flow in from around the globe. The Coalition had managed to establish several beachheads on the planet's surface, but their progress was slower than anyone had expected. Every human city had become a fortress, every civilian a potential combatant. "Ma'am, we're getting reports." "From the European theater," reported Colonel Anderson from the communications station. "The aliens tried to take Berlin this morning. Our people held them off, but the casualty reports are heavy on both sides." Lisa nodded grimly. The ground war was taking a terrible toll on both sides, but humanity had advantages that the aliens hadn't anticipated. Every human knew their own neighborhood better than any invader could. Every building had been prepared for defense. Every subway tunnel had been turned into a supply route or ambush point. More importantly, humans were fighting for their homes. The alien soldiers were professional warriors fighting for conquest and glory, but they had families and homes on distant worlds that they wanted to return to. Human defenders were fighting for the only world they had ever known. "What's the status on our industrial capacity?" she asked. "All major manufacturing has been moved underground as planned," Anderson replied. "Production rates are actually higher than they were before the invasion began. It turns out that people work harder when they're fighting for their survival." Lisa smiled at that. The coalition had expected to find a primitive industrial base that they could easily disrupt with orbital bombardment. Instead, they found that humanity had spent decades moving their most important factories deep underground, where they were protected from orbital attack and could continue operating even under siege. The war was far from over. But humanity was proving to be a more difficult opponent than anyone had expected. The massive hangar bay beneath the lunar surface hummed with activity as technicians made final preparations on the largest human fleet ever assembled. David Kim walked among the ships, inspecting each vessel with the eye of someone who had spent the last year learning to fight an enemy with superior technology. These weren't the same converted civilian craft that had been harassing alien supply lines. These were warships, built with a combination of human engineering and captured alien technology that had been reverse-engineered at a speed that amazed even human scientists. 1 year had passed since the coalition invasion began, and humanity was ready to take the fight beyond their home system. Operation Breakout would either mark the beginning of humanity's counterattack or it would be their final, desperate gamble before extinction. David preferred to think of it as the moment when Earth stopped playing defense and started hunting. "Colonel Kim, final systems check is complete," reported Lieutenant Anna Petrov from her position near the lead ship. "All vessels are ready for hyperspace jump. The new hybrid drive systems are showing green across the board." David nodded and walked to his command ship, a sleek vessel that looked like nothing else in the galaxy. Human designers had taken the basic layout of a coalition cruiser and improved it in ways that alien engineers had never considered. It was smaller than its alien counterpart, but faster, more maneuverable, and packed with weapons that could punch through enemy shields like. They were made of paper. The key to humanity's technological breakthrough had been their approach to problem solving, where alien scientists followed established procedures and worked within known parameters. Human researchers threw out the rulebook entirely. They took alien technology apart piece by piece, figured out how it worked, then rebuilt it better than the original designers had ever imagined possible. "All ships, this is Breakout Leader," David spoke into his communicator as he settled into the command chair. "We've spent a year learning how these aliens think, how they fight, how they die. Today we show them what happens when humans go on the hunt. Remember your targets and remember your mission. We're not just fighting for Earth anymore. We're fighting to make sure no other world faces what we faced." The fleet began to move, 60 ships rising from hidden launch bays scattered across the lunar surface. They had been built in secret, using manufacturing facilities that the coalition didn't even know existed. As they cleared the moon's gravity well and aligned for their hyperspace jump, David felt a mixture of excitement and fear that he hadn't experienced since his first combat mission. The jump to hyperspace was smooth, much smoother than it should have been given that these were prototype engines using alien technology. But human engineers had made improvements that alien designers had never considered, finding ways to reduce the stress on both ship and crew during faster-than-light travel. Their target was a coalition supply depot 3 light-years from Earth, a massive space station that served as a staging point for military operations in this sector of the galaxy. According to intelligence gathered from captured alien computers, the station was lightly defended because the coalition believed it was safely behind their front lines. When the human fleet dropped out of hyperspace near the depot, the alien defenders had perhaps 5 minutes to realize what was happening before the attack began. David's ships moved in formation patterns that had never been seen before in galactic warfare, each vessel following a path that seemed random but was actually calculated to provide maximum firepower. While minimizing exposure to enemy weapons, the space battle was unlike anything the galaxy had ever witnessed. Human ships moved with a precision and speed that alien tacticians had thought impossible, their weapons firing in coordinated volleys that tore through enemy shields and armor with devastating efficiency. But what truly shocked the coalition defenders was the human willingness to sacrifice their own ships to achieve victory. When Captain Maria Santos realized her ship's engines were failing, she didn't retreat to a safe distance to make repairs. Instead, she accelerated directly toward the largest enemy vessel, her crew working frantically to overload the ship's reactor. The resulting explosion took out not only her target, but 2 other alien ships that had been moving to assist. It was a tactic that no civilized species would consider, sacrificing an entire crew to destroy enemy vessels. But humans weren't fighting by civilized rules. They were fighting to survive, and survival sometimes required sacrifices that others would consider insane. Within 2 hours, the supply depot was in human hands. More importantly, the computers and databases they captured provided intelligence about coalition operations throughout this sector of the galaxy. Human cryptographers, working with AI systems that had been trained to recognize alien communication patterns, began breaking enemy codes faster than the aliens could change them. But the real victory came 3 days later, when human forces intercepted a coalition supply convoy that was heading for the front lines around Earth. Instead of simply destroying the ships, David's raiders captured them intact along with their crews and cargo. For the first time since the war began, humans had alien prisoners. The interrogation of these prisoners revealed something that changed everything about humanity's understanding of their enemy. The coalition wasn't a unified government ruled by shared ideology. It was a loose alliance of 12 species held together by fear and economic necessity. Many of the member species had been conquered themselves in the distant past, and their loyalty to the coalition was based more on survival than genuine cooperation. Dr. Thomas Anderson, leading the human intelligence operation, realized that this information represented an opportunity that could change the entire course of the war. Instead of fighting 12 alien species united against humanity, they could potentially turn those species against each other. The first attempt at alien diplomacy took place in a captured coalition cruiser drifting in deep space. The prisoner was a high-ranking officer from a species called the Traitors, beings who resembled tall, thin humans with pale blue skin and oversized eyes. They had joined the coalition not out of aggression, but because they needed protection from more warlike species. "Your people don't have to die for the coalition's expansion," Anderson explained through a translation device. "We're not interested in conquering your worlds or enslaving your people. We just want to be left alone." The alien officer listened with obvious skepticism. In 50 years of coalition expansion, no species had ever offered terms to their enemies. Conquest was total, or it was nothing. "What do you propose?" the alien finally asked. Anderson smiled. "We propose that you stop shooting at us, and we'll help you deal with the species that forced you to join the coalition in the first place. Your people can have their independence back. All we ask is that you stay out of our territory." It was the beginning of a new phase in the war, one where humans would prove that they understood alien psychology better than the aliens understood themselves. Within weeks, cracks began to appear in the coalition alliance as member species started to question whether this war was worth the losses they were taking. The Traitors were the first to withdraw from the invasion fleet, taking their ships and returning to their home territories, but they wouldn't be the last. Humanity had found the coalition's weakness, and they intended to exploit it ruthlessly. The former coalition military base at Proxima Station had been transformed into something the galaxy had never seen before. Where once alien warships had docked to refuel and rearm for attacks on human colonies, Now there were refugee ships carrying civilians from a dozen different species. Admiral Sarah Brooks walked through the station's main corridor, observing the controlled chaos as her people worked to process thousands of alien families who had fled the collapsing coalition territories. 2 years had passed since humanity's counterattack began, and the war had become something entirely different from what either side had originally planned. The coalition was fighting a defensive war now, trying to hold their territory together as member species abandoned the alliance one by one. Human forces had penetrated deep into what had once been secure coalition space, but instead of simply destroying everything they found, they were offering something unprecedented: protection to any alien civilians who wanted it. "Admiral, we're receiving another distress call from the Kepler sector," reported Captain Robert Chun from the station's command center. "Looks like another civilian convoy trying to escape the fighting. They're requesting safe passage to human territory." Sarah nodded and made her way to the command center, where holographic displays showed the current military situation throughout this region of space. Red markers indicated coalition military assets, blue markers showed human forces, and green markers represented the growing number of alien, civilian populations that had placed themselves under human protection. The transformation had been gradual. At first, when human forces captured their first coalition worlds, they had expected to find heavily defended military installations and hostile populations. Instead, they found ordinary families trying to survive in a war they had never wanted. Rather than treating these aliens as enemies, human commanders had made a decision that shocked the galaxy. They offered citizenship and protection to anyone who wanted to abandon the coalition cause. It was a strategy that made no sense according to traditional galactic warfare doctrine. Conquering species were supposed to enslave or eliminate the populations they defeated, not offer them equal status in their own society. But humans seemed to operate by different rules, and those rules were proving devastatingly effective against an enemy alliance built on fear and coercion. "What's the status of our diplomatic efforts?" Sarah asked as she reviewed the latest intelligence reports. "Better than we could have hoped," Chun replied. "The Dominion leadership is in complete disarray. 3 of their core worlds have declared independence and requested human protection. The warriors are still fighting, but they're running low on supplies now that most of their allies have abandoned them." Sarah smiled at that news. The Dominion had been one of the coalition's most powerful member species, militaristic beings who had joined the alliance because they enjoyed conquest and the spoils that came with it. But even they were learning that human warfare was unlike anything they had faced before. The key to humanity's success wasn't just superior tactics or better technology, though they had both. It was their approach to victory. Most galactic civilizations fought to establish dominance over their enemies. Humans fought to eliminate the conditions that had made the war necessary in the first place. "Admiral, incoming priority transmission from Earth Command," announced Lieutenant Walsh from the communications station. The holographic display shifted to show General Lisa Nakamura calling from her command bunker back on Earth. She looked tired but satisfied, the expression of someone who could finally see light at the end of a very long tunnel. "Sarah, I have new orders for you," she began without preamble. "Intelligence has located Admiral Thane's command ship. It's holed up in the Centauri system with what's left of the Coalition's core fleet. We want you to take him alive if possible." Sarah felt a grim satisfaction at those words. Thane had been the architect of the invasion that had killed millions of humans and turned Earth into a fortress world. He had commanded the Coalition forces with ruthless efficiency, showing no mercy to human civilians and no respect for the laws of war that most civilized species observed. But capture him alive? That would be more difficult than simply destroying his fleet. "Any particular reason we want him breathing?" she asked. "Political," Nakamura replied. "The remaining Coalition species need to see that this war can end. If we execute their supreme commander, they'll fight to the last ship out of pure desperation. If we capture him and offer reasonable terms, we might be able to end this without having to hunt down every last Coalition vessel in the galaxy." Sarah understood the logic, even if she didn't like it. The war had already gone on longer than anyone had expected, and while humanity was clearly winning, victory was coming at a terrible cost. Every day the fighting continued meant more human casualties and more alien civilian populations caught in the crossfire. Understood, General. We'll bring him in. The attack on the Centauri system began with a level of coordination that would have been impossible 2 years earlier. Human forces had learned to fight as a unified force despite being scattered across dozens of star systems, their actions coordinated by AI networks that could process tactical information faster than any biological brain, but this battle was different from the hit-and-run raids that had characterized the early phase of humanity's counterattack. This was a direct assault on the Coalition's last major stronghold, and Admiral Thane was ready for them. The alien fleet that emerged from behind Centauri's largest moon was the most powerful force the Coalition had ever assembled. Over 200 warships representing the military might of a dozen species, all of them crewed by veterans who had survived years of fighting against human forces. They knew human tactics now, had learned to counter human advantages through bitter experience. The space battle that followed lasted for 6 hours and covered an area of space larger than Earth's entire solar system. Human ships darted between enemy formations like schools of fish, their movements seeming random but actually following complex patterns calculated to maximize damage while minimizing losses. Coalition vessels responded with disciplined formations that had been refined over centuries of galactic warfare, but the turning point came when Sarah realized that Admiral Thane was making the same mistake that so many other Coalition commanders had made. He was fighting to win while humans were fighting to survive. And sometimes, survival required tactics that no sane military commander would consider. All ships implement Containment Protocol 7, she ordered. I want every Coalition vessel trapped in this system, nothing gets out. Around the edges of the battle, human ships began to take positions that made no tactical sense from a traditional perspective. Instead of concentrating their firepower on enemy vessels, they spread out to cover every possible escape route from the system. It meant that the human fleet was stretched thin, vulnerable to concentrated attack, but it also meant that the Coalition forces were completely surrounded. Admiral Thane realized what was happening just as the trap closed around his fleet. The humans weren't trying to destroy his ships. They were trying to capture them intact, along with their crews and commanders. It was a level of tactical ambition that bordered on madness, but as Thane watched his escape routes disappear one by one, he began to understand that madness might be humanity's greatest weapon. The Coalition's surrender came not with a dramatic final battle, but with a simple transmission from Admiral Thane's flagship. This is Admiral Thane of the Hegemony Fleet. We surrender. We request terms. Sarah looked around the bridge of her command ship at the faces of her crew. They looked exhausted, relieved, and slightly surprised that it was finally over. After 2 years of desperate fighting, the war was ending not with humanity's extinction, but with their complete victory. Transmit our standard terms, she ordered. Full surrender, repatriation of all human prisoners, and cooperation with the establishment of the new galactic government. In exchange, we guarantee the safety of all Coalition personnel and their families. It was the same offer humanity had been making throughout the war, and it still seemed to surprise alien commanders who expected execution or enslavement. But humans had learned something important during their struggle for survival. The best way to ensure lasting peace was to make sure that your former enemies had a stake in maintaining it. The Great Assembly Hall on Terra Station floated in the space where Earth's moon had once orbited alone. 5 years after the failed Coalition invasion, the station served as the headquarters of the Terran Commonwealth, a voluntary alliance of species that had grown from the ashes of the old galactic order. Secretary General Robert Chun stood at the podium, looking out at representatives from 47 different worlds. Many of them former Coalition territories that had requested human protection during the war. The transformation had been more complete than anyone had dared to hope. Where once the galaxy had been divided between the Coalition's member species and their victims, now there was something new. The Commonwealth wasn't built on conquest or coercion, but on the simple principle that every species had the right to exist without fear of extinction or enslavement. The motion before us today concerns the petition from the hegemony worlds for full membership in the Commonwealth, Chun announced to the assembled delegates. After 5 years of probationary status, their rehabilitation programs have been completed and their commitment to peaceful coexistence has been demonstrated. In the audience, Admiral Thane listened to the proceedings with emotions he still didn't fully understand. 5 years ago, he had been the supreme commander of the greatest military force the galaxy had ever seen. Now he was a private citizen living on a human colony world, working as a technical advisor to help design better starships for the Commonwealth fleet. The humans had offered him a choice after his surrender: exile to a peaceful world where he could live out his days in comfort, or active participation in building the new galactic civilization they envisioned. He had chosen the latter, partly out of curiosity and partly because he had nowhere else to go. His own people had stripped him of rank and honors after his defeat, viewing his survival as a sign of cowardice rather than pragmatism, but working with humans had taught him things about warfare and civilization that 50 years of coalition service had never shown him. Humans didn't just fight to win. They fought to create conditions where future wars would be unnecessary. It was a concept that most galactic species found difficult to understand, but it was proving remarkably effective. The hegemony delegation wishes to address the assembly, announced the Commonwealth's chief administrator, a tall alien with blue skin who had once been a coalition diplomat. Admiral Thane rose from his seat and walked to the speaking platform, aware that every eye in the hall was watching him. Many of these representatives remembered him as the architect of the invasion that had nearly destroyed Earth. Others knew him only as the alien who had helped design the Commonwealth's constitution and legal framework. 5 years ago, I led an invasion force to your world because my people believed that conquest was the natural order of the universe. He began, his words translated instantly into dozens of languages. We had conquered 47 worlds using the same strategy: arrive with overwhelming force, demand surrender, and crush any resistance with superior technology. It had never failed. He paused, looking out at the faces of beings from across the galaxy, many of them from species that had once been enemies of each other. But Earth was different. Not because humans had better weapons or superior numbers, but because they refused to accept that conquest was inevitable. They fought not just to survive, but to prove that there was another way for civilizations to interact. When they won, they could have done to us what we had planned to do to them. Instead, they offered us something we had never experienced: the chance to be part of something better than what we had built through fear and violence. The hall was completely silent now. Even the usual background murmur of translation devices had stopped. The hegemony worlds formally request full membership in the Terran Commonwealth, not because we seek protection or economic advantage, but because we have learned that the universe is large enough for all of us to exist in peace. We offer our knowledge, our resources, and our commitment to the principles that make the Commonwealth different from every galactic government that has come before it. The vote was unanimous, as Chun had expected it would be. The Commonwealth's membership requirements were strict but fair: complete disarmament of aggressive military forces, establishment of democratic institutions, and a commitment to resolve disputes through negotiation rather than warfare. Species that met these requirements were welcomed as equals, regardless of their past actions. After the session ended, Chin walked to his private office overlooking the main docking bay, where ships from dozens of worlds came and went in a constant stream of commerce and communication. Through the transparent aluminum windows, he could see Earth in the distance, its surface still scarred from the war but slowly healing as massive terraforming projects restored the damaged continents. "Sir, there's someone here to see you," announced his aide from the doorway. Rick Torres entered the office, moving with the careful steps of someone whose body had been rebuilt more than once during the war. "The former Luna base commander now," served as the Commonwealth's Director of Colonial Affairs, overseeing the establishment of human settlements throughout former coalition space. "How did the vote go?" he asked, settling into a chair across from Chun's desk, as expected. "The hegemony is now a full member. That brings us to 63 member worlds, with another dozen applications pending review." Rick nodded thoughtfully. "Hard to believe, isn't it? 5 years ago, we were fighting for our survival. Now, we're the foundation of a new galactic civilization." Chun looked out at Earth again, remembering the coffee shops and parks that had existed before the war, the ordinary life that had been interrupted by alien ships blocking out the stars. Most of those places had been rebuilt now, but they were different somehow. The people who lived there had been changed by the knowledge that they were no longer alone in the universe, and that their survival had depended on their willingness to fight for something worth preserving. "The strange thing is, we never wanted to rule the galaxy," Chun said quietly. "We just wanted to be left alone." Rick smiled at that. Maybe that's why it worked. Every other galactic power tried to build their empire through force. We built ours by giving people something worth choosing. The door chimed again, and Admiral Sarah Brooks entered, still wearing the dark blue uniform of the Commonwealth Fleet. She had aged during the war years, but her eyes still held the sharp intelligence that had made her one of humanity's most effective commanders. "Sorry to interrupt, but we've got a situation developing in the Outer Rim," she said without preamble. "Long-range sensors are picking up distress signals from an unknown species. Looks like they're under attack by something we've never seen before." Chun felt a familiar chill at those words. The galaxy was vast, and the Commonwealth had only explored a small fraction of it. There were bound to be other civilizations out there, some of them potentially hostile. "How far out?" he asked. 6 weeks at maximum hyperspace velocity. "The signals are fragmented, but our linguists think they're asking for help. The attacking force appears to be using technology that doesn't match any known galactic civilization." Rick stood up slowly, his expression grim. "Looks like we might need to dust off the old playbooks." "Maybe," Sarah replied. "But this time, it's different. This time we're not fighting alone." Chin nodded and activated his communications console. Within minutes, he was connected to the Commonwealth Council, where representatives from 63 worlds were already discussing the situation. The debate was brief but intense, with voices speaking in dozens of languages as translation systems worked to keep up with the rapid exchange of ideas. The vote, when it came, was exactly what Chun had expected. The Commonwealth would respond to the distress call, not because they sought new territory or resources, but because they had learned something important during their own struggle for survival. No species should have to face extinction alone. "Admiral Brooks, prepare the fleet," Chun ordered, "and send word to all member worlds. We're going to show the galaxy that the Commonwealth doesn't just protect its own people. We protect anyone who needs protection." 2 weeks later, the largest fleet in Commonwealth history departed from Terra Station, bound for the unknown regions of space where another species was fighting for its survival. The fleet consisted of ships from 30 different worlds, their crews working together with a level of cooperation that would have been impossible under the old coalition system. But the most important ship in the fleet was a small courier vessel, carrying a simple message in every known galactic language. It was the same message that humanity had wished someone could have sent to them 5 years earlier, when alien ships had first appeared in Earth's skies. "This is the Terran Commonwealth. We have received your distress call. Help is coming." As the fleet jumped to hyperspace, Chen remained on Terra Station, watching Earth turn slowly in the distance. The war had changed everything, not just for humanity but for the entire galaxy. Where once there had been an empire built on fear and conquest, now there was an alliance built on cooperation and mutual defense. The galaxy had tried to conquer Earth, and in the process they had learned to fear the human name, but not for the reasons they had expected. They feared humanity not because humans were cruel or merciless, but because they were the opposite. They had proven that strength could be used to protect rather than dominate, that victory could lead to peace rather than oppression. And now, as the Commonwealth fleet raced toward another world in need, the galaxy was learning that the human name represented something it had never seen before: hope for species that refused to surrender, help for civilizations that fought to remain free, and the promise that no world would ever again have to face the choice between slavery and extinction. The war was over, but humanity's greatest battle was just beginning. Not a battle for survival, but a battle to prove that the universe was large enough for everyone to live in peace. It was a battle they intended to win, one world at a time.